The faint glow of neon signs flickered against the darkening sky as Terence eased his dusty pickup truck into the parking space in front of Elliot's tap room, a modest bar tucked away just off Highway 74 in North Carolina. The establishment was nothing extravagant. Rather, it stood as a beloved staple for locals, truckers, and road-weary souls seeking a cold drink and a quiet corner. Terence, who had only returned from deployment a week earlier, craved nothing more than a moment of respite from the relentless demands of everyday life. With the gentle rumble of his engine, he pulled up and, after a brief pause to take in the cool evening air, switched off the ignition. He stepped out onto the gravel lot and walked toward the bar. The building's faded sign and worn facade testified to years of service to the community. Pushing open the creaky door, Terence entered Elliot's taproom and was immediately greeted by a wave of warm chatter mingling with the soft hum of an old jukebox. The jukebox, playing a well-worn Johnny Cash tune, lent a timeless atmosphere to the room. Terence scanned the space. In one corner, a couple of regulars played pool with casual competitiveness. Near the bar, a group laughed boisterously as they clinked glasses, and in several other corners, solitary patrons nursed their drinks in quiet reflection. He had not come here seeking conversation or camaraderie, only a brief escape. Quietly, he found a corner table near the back of the taproom. Although the table was tucked away from the center of activity, it still offered a clear view of the entire room. Clad in his camouflage uniform, Terence blended seamlessly into the subdued ambience, with the only contrast being the scuffed sneakers on his feet, shoes chosen for comfort rather than style. Taking a seat, he ordered a glass of water and settled in, his eyes occasionally drifting toward the jukebox as his mind wandered. Thoughts of the family he was finally going to see after so many long months filled his head. His mother's warm, hearty cooking and the excited voice of his niece became his cherished distractions from the burdens of his recent experiences. Just as he began to lose himself in these pleasant thoughts, the door slammed open with a resounding bang that broke his reverie. A group of 6 men strode in, their heavy boots thudding against the wooden floor. They appeared to be older, clad in worn leather jackets, adorned with patches and insignias that proclaimed their status as veterans. Their presence was boisterous. They laughed loudly, clapped each other on the back, and made their way confidently toward the bar. Terence offered them only a passing glance before returning to his quiet drink, determined not to let their intrusion disrupt his moment of calm. Yet one of the men did not simply pass by without notice. The leader, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard and piercing eyes, halted mid-laugh when he spotted Terence. Muttering something under his breath to the others, he turned, and soon every one of them fixated their stares on Terence. The carefree laughter that had accompanied their entrance faded into a simmering tension that slowly pervaded the room. Terence felt their eyes tracking him, a familiar, judgmental look that silently measured and assessed him without any real context. Sipping his water, he tried to focus on the comforting strains of Johnny Cash, although the uneasy energy in the room made concentration difficult. As the sense of disquiet grew, the group huddled closer together. Their voices dropped to low, pointed whispers. The burly leader leaned in toward one of his companions and muttered something, prompting a stifled laugh and a pointed glance in Terence's direction. Despite the palpable hostility, Terence maintained his calm. His posture remained relaxed, though every muscle was primed with vigilance, a hard-earned skill from years of service under pressure. Even as he tried to lose himself in the comforting strains of the jukebox, he knew that the night, which had begun as a simple escape, was about to take a turn he had not anticipated. Before long, the soft hum of the jukebox was drowned out by the heavy, deliberate thuds of boots as the group made their way directly toward Terence's table. At the forefront was the burly man with the salt and pepper beard, his eyes locking onto Terence with the intensity of a hawk scrutinizing its prey. Terence sensed the energy shift even before the men reached his table. The general chatter in the bar gradually diminished into an expectant hush. The bartender paused mid-pour, and regulars exchanged wary glances as they watched the unfolding scene. Setting his glass down, Terence leaned back slightly, his calm demeanor belying the alertness of his trained body. "Ake," the leader barked, coming to an abrupt halt just a few feet from Terence. His voice was rough and gravelly, laced with a dismissive edge. "Nice uniform you got there. Where'd you get it? A Halloween store?" The men behind him chuckled, their laughter thick with mockery and derision. Terence looked up steadily, his face composed despite the derisive comment. "I've heard worse," he replied evenly. "It's mine. I earned it." His response was measured and cool, refusing to rise to their bait. The leader raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "Earned it, huh? That's funny, because I've seen plenty of real soldiers, and none of them wear sneakers with their fatigues." His tone dripped with scorn as he continued. "You're trying to play dress-up for sympathy, or maybe you're after a free drink." Though Terence's jaw tightened at the insinuation, his voice remained level. "I don't need your sympathy or a free drink. I'm just here to enjoy my evening." The leader's lips curled into a sneer as he leaned in closer, his beer-soaked breath invading Terence's personal space. "You don't look like no soldier to me," he sneered. "Where are your boots, your tags? Hell, you probably don't even know how to salute properly," one of the men behind him added with a mocking tone. "Bet you couldn't tell us the first thing about basic training." Another chimed in, "Probably never seen a battlefield in your life." Their voices rose in a cacophony of laughter that grated against the mellow hum of the jukebox. Throughout the tirade, Terence remained silent, his eyes shifting slowly between the men. He was not intimidated, but he was also not one to fan the flames of provocation. His years of military service had taught him the value of choosing his battles carefully, yet there was something about this encounter that cut particularly deep. It wasn't simply their insulting words, it was the sheer audacity and ignorance underlying their accusations. Finally, Terence broke his silence. "I don't need to prove anything to you," he said, his voice calm but firm. The leader, visibly irritated by Terence's composed response, stepped even closer. His large frame loomed over the table as he sneered. "You think you're some kind of hero, huh? Walking in here like you belong? I don't think you do." For a brief moment, the room seemed to hold its collective breath as Terence met the man's glare unflinchingly. "I've served 3 tours overseas," Terence replied steadily, his voice carrying an edge of hard-earned authority. "And I don't need your approval to belong anywhere." For an instant, the mocking laughter ceased, as if the leader's bravado had faltered under the weight of Terence's words. Yet pride would not allow the leader to relent. With a scoff, he retorted, "Yeah? Prove it. Show us your tags. Otherwise you're nothing but a liar." Terence's eyes flicked around the group, noting the uneasy glances exchanged among the other men. They no longer seemed as sure about their leader's accusations, but none dared speak up. Exhaling slowly, Terence resisted the urge to escalate the situation. "I don't owe you proof," he said quietly. "But if you think starting something here is a good idea, I'd suggest you think again." The tension in the room was now almost tangible. The bartender's hand hovered near the phone, poised to call for help, while other patrons shifted uneasily in their seats, their eyes darting between Terence and the group. Despite the charged atmosphere, the leader did not move immediately. Instead, his smirk returned, sharper and meaner than before. "You've got a smart mouth," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Let's see if it's as quick as your fists." His words hung in the air, as taut as a wire stretched to its breaking point. Then, with a sudden, aggressive motion, the leader lunged forward, his hand reaching for Terence's collar. The movement was clumsy, a display of raw bravado rather than refined skill, but it was enough to set everything in motion. Terence reacted instantly, his years of military training kicking in. With a swift, precise movement, he sidestepped the grab and caught the leader's wrist in midair. In one fluid motion, Terence twisted the man's arm behind his back and used his weight to push him forward, pinning him face first against the edge of the table. A strangled yelp of pain escaped the leader as his defiant bravado evaporated in an instant. The entire bar erupted in gasps and murmurs, the shocked silence of the onlookers amplifying the gravity of the moment. For a long, tense moment, the remaining men froze, their wide-eyed stares fixed on their now immobilized leader. No one moved or dared to intervene. Then, in a voice that cut through the stunned silence, low, controlled and imbued with unmistakable authority, Terence said, "I told you to think twice before starting something." He leaned in slightly, his grip firm yet measured. "You don't know who you're messing with." The leader struggled against Terence's hold, but it was futile. The soldier's calm efficiency left no room for error or escape. From across the room, one of the bikers took a hesitant step forward, his hands raised in a half-hearted attempt to intervene. "Hey, man," he stammered, "let him go. He didn't mean nothing by it." But the mobile hung dead, its musket running and its scope fixed on. Terrence's eyes locked onto the would-be intervener. "He came at me," he said steadily. "You saw it." His tone was unshaken by the chaos swirling around him. "If you want him free, tell him to calm down first." At that moment, the bartender, who had been watching silently, phone in hand, finally spoke up. "Maybe it's time for you all to leave before this gets any worse," he suggested. But the leader, known among his crew as Hank, was not ready to back down completely. Even as Terrence's hold on him persisted, Hank's face was pressed against the table, and through gritted teeth he snarled, "Call the cops! This guy just assaulted me. He's wearing a fake uniform, and I want him arrested." With a controlled shove, Terrence released the leader, who stumbled forward, clutching his arm and turning to glare furiously at the soldier. "You'll pay for this," Hank growled, his voice dripping with malice. In that moment, the other bikers rallied behind their embittered leader. Emboldened by what they perceived as a slight against their honor, one of them fumbled for his phone and dialed 911 with trembling hands. "Yeah, we've got a guy here impersonating a soldier," he announced loudly enough for everyone in the bar to hear. "And he just assaulted my friend." Terrence stood still, his expression calm and composed even as his mind raced. He knew how this situation looked, and understood all too well how quickly things could spiral out of control. Yet he also knew that he had done nothing wrong. His years of service, his sacrifices, everything he stood for would hold up against these baseless accusations, if only he remained calm. Meanwhile, the bar buzzed with murmurs as patrons whispered among themselves and cast sidelong glances at him. Some appeared uneasy, while others seemed quietly impressed by the ease with which he had handled the confrontation. Still, no one stepped forward to challenge the events that had just transpired. Then, the sound of approaching sirens cut sharply through the tense air. Red and blue lights flashed against the bar's windows, casting shifting shadows across the room. The doors swung open, and 2 police officers stepped inside. One was a broad-shouldered man with a close-cropped haircut, his expression unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses. The other was a woman with sharp features and a calm, observant demeanor. Their presence immediately silenced the room as every eye turned toward them. "We got a call about an altercation," the male officer said, his voice steady but firm. "Can someone explain what's going on here?" Hank, still clutching his wrist and red-faced from the encounter, was the first to speak. With a shaky finger pointed directly at Terrence, he declared, "That guy assaulted me, and he's impersonating a soldier. Look at him. He doesn't even have proper boots on." The officer's gaze shifted to Terrence, who continued to stand quietly by his table, his posture relaxed but alert. "Is that true?" the officer asked in a neutral tone. Terrence shook his head slowly and met the officer's eyes. "No, sir," he replied. "This man and his friends confronted me because they didn't believe I'm a real soldier. When he tried to grab me, I defended myself." The female officer stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room. "Did anyone witness what happened?" she asked, her voice carrying a calm authority. The bartender broke the tense silence by saying, "I saw it. Hank went after him first. That soldier just reacted to protect himself. It wasn't an assault." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and one patron near the jukebox added, "Yeah, he didn't start anything. Hank's been on edge since he walked in." The male officer turned back to Terrence. "Do you have any proof of your service, sir?" he asked. Terrence nodded and, keeping his movements measured, gestured toward the duffel bag resting on the floor by his table. "In that bag, I have my service uniform, with my name and rank, along with my ID and my wallet. You're welcome to take a look." The officer retrieved the bag and carefully opened it, pulling out the neatly folded uniform adorned with badges and insignias. After a brief inspection, he turned to his partner, who nodded in quiet confirmation. "You're clear," the male officer said in a firm but respectful tone. "We appreciate your cooperation." Hank, still nursing his bruised pride, growled, "You're just going to take his word for it? He could have faked all that." The female officer shot Hank a sharp look. "From what I've heard, you instigated this," she said curtly, "and you're lucky he's not pressing charges for assault." The words hit Hank like a slap, and his bluster began to deflate. The other bikers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. The male officer continued, "Here's how this is going to go. We're filing a report about this incident. If you want to pursue your claims, you're welcome to do so, but you should know that false accusations are a serious matter." Hank opened his mouth to retort but soon closed it again, realizing he was cornered. The officers then stepped back, scanning the room one last time as the tension began to ease. The female officer turned to Terence. "Thank you for keeping your cool. We'll make sure this is documented correctly," she said. Terence gave her a small nod and replied, "Thank you, officer." As the bikers began to shuffle out of the bar, their earlier bravado replaced by an awkward, heavy silence, Hank glared at Terence one last time before disappearing through the door. The police officers followed shortly after, and the bar slowly returned to its usual hum of conversation. Terence sat back down at his table, his drink untouched. The weight of the encounter lingered, yet he felt a quiet relief that the situation had not escalated any further. He felt around him other patrons whispered softly and stole glances in his direction. Their earlier wariness had shifted into a quiet respect. A few days later, Terence found himself working on his old pickup truck in the driveway of his small home on the outskirts of Fayetteville, North Carolina. The late afternoon sun cast long, languid shadows across the yard as he tightened a stubborn bolt under the hood. Though he had faced far worse in combat, the memory of the bar incident clung to him, not because of the confrontation itself, but because of what it symbolized. It was yet another instance in which someone had judged him unfairly, and he doubted it would be the last time. Lost in thought, Terence was drawn back to the present by the crunch of tires on gravel. He straightened up, wiped his hands on a rag, and turned to see a motorcycle rolling into his driveway. The rider, a wiry man with thinning hair and a leather jacket that looked 2 sizes too big, was unmistakably one of the men from the bar. Terence recognized him as Bill, one of Hank's crew. Bill cut the engine and dismounted, removing his helmet and pausing for a moment as though uncertain whether to approach Terence. His posture was cautious, almost apologetic, as if he were approaching a stray animal he did not wish to startle. "Right?" Bill asked quietly. Terence nodded but said nothing, waiting to see where this would lead. Bill cleared his throat and, stuffing his hands into his jacket pockets, continued, "I wanted to come by and say I'm sorry for what happened at the bar." Terence raised an eyebrow, surprised, yet not entirely convinced. "You were part of it," he stated evenly. Bill's face flushed with guilt as he nodded. "I know. I didn't stop it, and I should have. Hank, he's got a way of riling people up, and I went along with it. But that doesn't make it right. I've been thinking about it ever since, and I just wanted to tell you that." Terence studied Bill for a long moment. The man's discomfort was evident, but so was his sincerity. "Why now?" Terence finally asked in a steady tone. Bill shrugged, looking down at his boots. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because seeing you handle yourself the way you did made me realize just how wrong we were. You didn't deserve any of that." For a long moment, Terence said nothing. Then he sighed and leaned against his truck, crossing his arms. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Bill, I'm not asking for forgiveness as if it will erase what happened, but maybe, just maybe, it's a start." Bill's eyes shone with earnestness. "Maybe," he replied softly. "But more than that, I want to be better. I've seen a lot of hate in my life, and I don't want to add to it anymore. What we did was wrong, and I need to own up to it." Terence's expression softened slightly. He had heard apologies before, some genuine, some hollow, but this one felt different, not merely because of the words, but because of the effort it took for Bill to show up in person. "I appreciate you coming here," Terence said finally. "It doesn't erase what happened, but it's a start." Bill nodded, relief evident on his face. "Thanks, man. I mean it." With that, Bill mounted his bike and started the engine. Terence watched him ride away, feeling a strange mix of emotions. The incident at the bar had been an ugly reminder of the prejudice he still faced, but Bill's apology offered a glimmer of hope, a small, meaningful step toward understanding. Terence turned back to his truck, wiping his hands again as he reflected on the events of the past few days. He knew the fight against ignorance was far from over, but he also understood that he was not alone. The choices he made and the way he carried himself could influence and shift perspectives, one person at a time. As the evening air settled into calm, punctuated by the distant hum of cicadas, Terence felt a renewed sense of resolve. He was determined not only to keep moving forward, but also to face the world with the same strength and integrity that had carried him through his service. Sometimes, Terence mused, the battles aren't fought overseas. Sometimes they are fought right here, in bars, in homes, in the hearts of individuals. And, as far as he was concerned, those battles were just as important. The scars from combat might fade with time, but the fight for respect and dignity in everyday life was a challenge he would always carry with him. In the days that followed, life settled back into a cautious normalcy. Yet, Terence's encounter at Elliot's taproom remained a vivid reminder of the biases and misconceptions that still lurked in society. Though he had defended himself with calm precision, the incident had left its mark on him, a mark that was not physical, but deeply emotional. He knew that as long as ignorance persisted, he might face similar challenges again. Nevertheless, the memory of that tense night also bolstered his determination to stand tall, to let his actions speak louder than the unfounded words of others. As the weeks turned into months, Terence found solace in the routine of his daily life. He continued to work on his truck in the driveway of his modest home on the outskirts of Fairville, North Carolina. Each evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the yard in a warm, golden glow, he would pause to reflect on the events that had transpired. The physical scars of battle had long since healed, but the emotional battles, fought in bars, on streets, and in the quiet corners of public spaces, remained a part of his story. They reminded him that every day was a chance to redefine one's worth, regardless of how others might judge from the outside. One crisp afternoon, while Terence was busy at work on his pickup truck, the sound of tires crunching over gravel broke the silence. He looked up and saw a motorcycle rolling into his driveway. The rider, unmistakably one of the men from the bar, was a wiry fellow with thinning hair and a leather jacket that looked 2 sizes too big. Terence recognized him as Bill, and memories of the confrontation flooded back. Yet this time Bill's approach was markedly different. Bill, who had once been part of the unruly group that had harassed Terence, now rode up slowly. Cutting the engine, he dismounted and removed his helmet with a tentative hesitancy. His demeanor was cautious, almost apologetic, as if he were aware that he was approaching someone who had every right to be guarded. "Hi, Terence," Bill said quietly, his voice lacking the brashness of that fateful night. Terence regarded him for a moment in silence, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, Bill cleared his throat and said, I wanted to come by and apologize for what happened at the bar." There was no grand gesture, only a sincere admission that spoke volumes. Terence's eyes narrowed slightly, processing the unexpected apology. "You were part of that group," he said evenly. "You didn't stop it, did you?" Bill's face flushed with genuine remorse as he nodded slowly. "I know. I should have done something. Hank always had a way of riling everyone up, and I went along with it. I've thought about it every day since, and I'm truly sorry." The air between them was thick with unspoken understanding. Terence studied Bill for a long moment, the man's discomfort evident, yet his sincerity unmistakable. "Why now?" Terence finally asked, his tone steady. Bill shrugged, glancing down at his worn boots. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said softly. "And because, seeing how you handled yourself, it made me realize just how wrong we were. You didn't deserve any of that." Terence sighed, the weight of the past few days momentarily lifting. "I appreciate that you came by," he said quietly. "It doesn't change what happened, but it's a start." Bill's eyes shone with relief and earnestness. "Thank you, Terence. I mean it," he replied. With that, Bill mounted his motorcycle and rode off into the fading light, leaving Terence alone with his thoughts once again. Standing by his truck, Terence reflected on everything that had unfolded. He knew that the fight against ignorance and prejudice was far from over, yet he also understood that each small act of accountability could gradually shift perspectives. His service had taught him that battles were fought on many fronts. Sometimes on distant battlefields, and sometimes right here at home, in everyday interactions that revealed the deep-seated biases of society. Every choice he made, every moment of restraint or measured response, carried the potential to influence someone's view of the world. That evening, as the gentle sounds of cicadas filled the warm North Carolina air, Terence felt a renewed determination to continue facing the challenges head-on. He would not let the narrow judgments of others define him, nor would he allow their ignorance to diminish the sacrifices he had made. Instead, he resolved to carry on with the same strength and integrity that had seen him through countless trials during his time in service. In his eyes, every battle, whether fought overseas or in a local bar, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Sometimes, Terence mused as he finished tightening a bolt on his pickup truck, the most important battles were the ones fought not with weapons, but with dignity and perseverance in the face of everyday prejudice. These were the battles that mattered just as much as those on distant fronts, battles that shaped communities and redefined what it meant to stand up for one's truth. As night fell over the quiet driveway, Terence felt a sense of calm settle over him. The memories of that tumultuous evening at Elliot's tap room would remain as a reminder of the challenges he had overcome and of the resilience that lay within him. Even as the world continued to be marred by ignorance and unwarranted judgment, he knew that his own actions, quiet, steady, and true, had the power to inspire change. And so, with a final glance at his truck and a deep, measured breath, Terence resolved to face tomorrow with the same unyielding spirit. For him, the battles might be fought in bars, on streets, or even in the hearts of those who doubted him, but every victory, no matter how small, was a step toward a world where respect and understanding reigned supreme. In that determination, Terence found solace. He knew that every day offered a new chance to challenge ignorance, to reshape perceptions, and to prove that the strength of character forged in the crucible of service could triumph over the shallow judgments of others. With his gaze fixed on the horizon, he embraced the knowledge that while some battles were visible to the world, the most important ones were fought quietly in the depths of one's heart. For Terence, this was not just a moment of personal redemption, it was a reaffirmation of the values he held dear: integrity, resilience, and the unwavering belief that every human being deserved respect, regardless of appearances. And though the path ahead might be fraught with challenges and moments of injustice, he knew that he would continue to stand tall, confident in the knowledge that his life's work, his sacrifices, and his enduring spirit would always speak louder than the baseless criticisms of those who sought to undermine him. In the end, Terence understood that the true measure of a person was not found in the judgments of strangers or the sneers of the ignorant, but in the quiet strength that allowed one to persevere against all odds. And with that thought echoing in his mind, he climbed into his truck, ready to drive forward into the night, undaunted, unbowed, and resolute in his commitment to face whatever battles might come his way, both abroad and at home.